So the Canadian Royal Mounted Police have renewed investigations of a polygamist community that is in southeast British Columbia recently, because the Canadian government has sort of hammered out with their rights and freedoms how they feel about polygamy, whether it should actually be illegal or not. There was a challenge to their 121-year-old law, anti-polygamy law, and now that they've sort of hammered that out in the courts, they're renewing investigations into this particular polygamist community, and I imagine probably the wider any other polygamy that they have in their country.
Okay.
And the particular reason that this specific group in southeast British Columbia is coming under fire is because they live right on the U.S.-Canadian border, and they've been basically accused of child trafficking, that they are bringing young underage children over from the United States into this community to be married to much older men. And the Chief Justice, Robert Bauman, wrote in his decision that I have concluded that this case is essentially about harm. More specifically, Parliament's reasoned apprehension of harm arising out of the practice of polygamy. This includes harm to women, children, society, and the institution of monogamous marriage. So basically, in their ruling as it relates to the Charter of Rights and Freedom, which, as I understand it, is essentially like Canada's constitution, what we in the United States would understand as a constitution. If I'm wrong, I'm sure a Canadian person will correct me, but I don't know much about Canada's government. But so effectively what they say is they see polygamy as this thing that actually harms children because, as we know, polygamy and it should also point out, I've been remiss in pointing this out, this particular polygamist group is the FLDS Church.
That's what I was going to ask, which religion this was tied to.
So it's the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's not the same as the Mormon Church that we have here in Utah. It's obviously they have it right there. I mean, it's a fundamentalist branch. They don't agree that God said polygamy is out, and I don't know where they fall on the blacks with the priesthood thing, but I imagine we could probably rewind that one as well. But so the Canadian government is looking at the way this particular institution runs polygamy, and they are seeing that it is not a group of consenting adults who are agreeing that polygamy is the way they want to run their life. It is minors being brought and married to much older men, and that whatever level of pedophilia they're assigning to that, they are seeing harm being done.
Is it minors in Utah, but not minors there? Do they have a different minor age? Is their minor age still 18?
I don't know what the age of consent is in Canada.
That's partially.
But they specifically they don't mention ages in the article that I've gotten off the Huffington Post here, but they specifically relate to underage girls being brought. So whatever the age of consent is, they are specifying it as underage girls being married to older men.
Okay.
So whatever, even if their age of consent is 10, this is lower than that. I don't think that it's 10. I imagine it's probably 16 or 18 in Canada. I'm going to guess 18, but whoever it is, they're underage. And as we saw with the FLDS Church here in the States, some of those girls were as young as 9 and 12.
Yeah.
And being that this is a different branch of the same group, I don't know. I don't have the ages of any of the girls, but
no, that's fine.
We can probably say it's comparable.
The point that I kind of want to make on this article is just that, personally, I don't actually believe that polygamy should be illegal. I think that polygamy should be an arrangement between consenting adults, and if you have a husband and a wife that wish to bring another wife or another husband into the marriage, that they should be able to do that. I mean, it's about they're consenting adults and everything else like that.
Right, and consenting adults who are not harming other people. And I would I guess agree with you to a point that if consenting adults want to do that, but I think when we look at the history of polygamy in North America, I don't know that there's an instance of polygamy that actually falls into the category.
Well, I'm sure there's instances, and clearly those instances probably don't get any attention because of the fact that they're probably very adult and complicated.
Right.
They're just adult relationships that probably don't have these kind of harmful child molestation level of issues.
Right.
But I'm pointing it out because I find it funny. Even the article states it in its title, targeting the polygamy.
Right.
And I just feel like that's such a weird way to go. I mean, why not be specific to targeting the minor abuse, the human trafficking, and things of that nature?
Well, I think that's basically
putting laws into place that if you're going to allow polygamy, you still would want to put laws in place to monitor it very, very carefully. I mean, I don't know. I'd have to be a lawyer to address those issues, but
I guess
the idea of saying we're going to attack polygamy specifically is always frustrating to me, because I know some polygamous families here in Utah that are very kind of normal families, and they're not FLDS. Usually they are LDS, but they secretly kind of have a polygamy thing.
I've never known anyone like that.
Oh, really?
No, but I guess the thing to point out here is that the reason that the Canadian authorities are, I think, specifically targeting polygamy is because it seems to me that in the instance of what's going on in Canada, the only instance of polygamy is this.
Right.
It's the one that's involving underage girls, and so maybe they would have, in their legal system, if you had adults who were consenting and wanted to have polygamous relationships, maybe they would have an ability to hire a lawyer and go forward and deal sort of like on a constitutional level with the Charter of Rights and Freedoms to say, don't outlaw polygamy, outlaw this, specify it with this particular form, with this thing. But I'm just guessing that there's really not a lot of Canadians who are stepping forward who want that. So that's a small group. That's a separate, I think, political issue. And I think the reason is what this Chief Justice Robert Bauman was saying. He sees that this polygamy they're dealing with is harming children.
Right, but he even points out the idea that it affects the idea of monogamous marriage.
Sure.
And I don't think that that's something to be defended, because then, if you go with this monogamous marriage or the traditional institute of marriage, then you have the whole gays shouldn't be married argument going on and things like that. And it goes back to the idea that, if you're not affecting me, if this is an adult decision between, consenting adults, then they should all be able to do that, because it doesn't affect anyone else. But this is, you're talking about, you're bringing in minors and you're actually trafficking them, and they're not consenting adults. Right. And I would be really curious to bet that the wives don't really have any say in the husband marrying these other people. And that's why polygamy is already very complicated, because it has to be a very open relationship. Sure. I mean, I almost picture the good polygamy as some sort of kind of hippie lifestyle,
hippie commune thing,
going down, but that to be considered safe per se.
Sure, and I'm not looking to. I think it's important to understand that, like, I'm not pro polygamy. I'm just not. I'm not against consenting adults making decisions that only affect consenting adults. I don't know. At the same time, because I'm not aware of any cases where polygamy was consented among all these adults who were like, yeah, this is totally the way we want to live. Specifically, I don't see a reason to, like, defend people's right to have polygamous marriage per se. I think that the larger issue at hand is the children who are being harmed, and that's the issue that should be tackled first.
That's my point. But that's kind of exactly my point. Is obviously I'm not pro polygamy. I certainly don't want to have multiple wives. I don't have the time, But I just don't. It's one of those things where it's like you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater because of this idea that you're attacking polygamy. But really, is the idea of polygamy the issue, or is it the fact that these guys you got 56-year-olds marrying 14-year-olds?
Right.
Like, that's really the issue, and why they don't target that and be like, oh, by the way, they're FLDS and polygamists, but we're going after them because they're child molesters and so on and trafficking humans. I don't quite know to the degree to which the trafficking is involved, but I just wanted to make that side note clear on my part of, like, I actually don't think that polygamy is something that we should legislate. It should be something. I mean, we should, the same way that you legislate marriage. I mean, the tax benefits and all that have to be weighed into the idea of how polygamy would work. But it's just it should a 19-year-old man and a 19-year-old man and a 22-year-old woman agree to all be married? Fine, I don't care.
It's one of those things where it's like, it's not really my business, but I think it comes back to the idea that that's not really, especially when you look at the tradition of polygamy in North America, that's not, I think,
that's
polygamy.
Not how it goes
it's not a polygamy that anyone's familiar with. Mm-hmm. So I think the idea of, can consenting adults engage in a polygamous marriage that is not somehow harmful to its member. You know, that's, and if people want to live in some kind of harmful thing, that's a bit their own business. But you know, I don't know. That's a larger issue. But I think in this case, Canada is not necessarily worried about the polygamy. They are just looking for the fastest route to deal with this child problem.
That's kind of my point. Don't you think there'd be a faster route already to deal with child molestation? Than
I don't know.
Than having to restructure polygamy laws in order to go after these people?
I don't know. Maybe they're just casting a wide net.
Yeah, and but that's why I mention it, because I just worry about when you cast those wide nets. It's the idea of the majority has a belief system that gays aren't good,
right.
and then the gays suffer because of it. Our goals are always to defend the weak.
And I think that if you have these theoretical consenting adults who want to engage in a polygamous marriage, I think if they came forward and wanted to make that case in the Canadian courts, they would be heard. And then, that's for their political system to engage, that's,
right.
as well, I think you could probably try to do that in the United States even. Like, you could have grounds to say, I want to sue for my right to do this, as for these adults to engage upon, that's, I don't know, that's a larger issue, and I guess bears discussing, but I don't know that there are any consenting adults who want polygamy who are actually going to take up that fight. If they want to, go do it. And
I do know.
And I'm all for society having that conversation, I guess. Yeah. I know I couldn't find a second woman to put up with me, so if you want it, have at it, I guess. Taking up that fight.